Well, we've talked about some of them. I think the expansion of testing beyond just evaluating model accuracy is really important, and we're seeing more and more of that. Even from a security perspective, right? I mentioned earlier that uh, modern machine learning systems in particular, have an interesting set of security concerns around how they might be manipulated in certain ways. And this can be, they can learn the wrong thing at training, they can do the wrong thing at inference, or they can possibly reveal information that you don't want them to reveal. And there are tools now for understanding those types of security policies in a particular context, and testing for those. And so I think the focus on testing, not just at model evaluation, but at system integration and then into operations and monitoring, is one of those big areas. And then I'll sort of make the meta observation. I've noticed, and not just because of the Software Engineering Institute and our perspective on the importance of AI engineering, but out there in the wild, right? As I go to different venues and conferences and have conversations with folks, the shift from the maybe you would call it hype around AI, right? The craze around AI and what AI can do to transform business and all kinds of applications across a broad variety of spaces and domains. The shift in the narrative is now, well, how do we do this right? How do we do this in a responsible and reliable way? And I think that as a development, right, starting to shift that narrative and think about, there is this amazing power here, but what are the right questions we need to ask? How do we build this in a way that we can know it's operating the way we want it to? And how do we monitor it and have it give information to its user community about how it's making decisions and how it's continuing to operate? That narrative shift from a meta perspective is quite promising from my personal perspective.
I want to agree with Matt and amplify just the nature of conversations that are evolving right now. I think we're seeing a lot of conversations around the power dynamics that AI systems create, the values that are embedded explicitly or implicitly into systems, who is involved in making these systems and who does it affect, and what is the disconnect between those two things. I certainly have a lot of excitement that those conversations are growing rapidly. And I hope that they are, it's not just our echo chamber that those conversations are happening in, that they're getting across, but I have a strong level of belief that that's the case. And we're going to see that more and more in the coming years. The other thing I find really promising are the tools that have gained a lot of traction that have helped with these questions of transparency and explainability. So the classic one is data sets or data sheets for data sets and model cards for model reporting. Those are small behavioral interventions of having folks document, where are you getting your data from? What are the attributes of this data source? Why did you choose it for these applications? And instantiating those processes, establishing them as part of the development pipeline, I think is super critical for transparency and repeatability, all of those aspects that we are seeing. And I think more and more those types of small different, they're high leverage point opportunities. It's a small change that can lead to a lot of impact. I think that more and more is what we're going to see as companies figure out how do you navigate these different situations that we're in, and how do we build towards more rigorous process on the creation of these systems.
There's a really cool example that I want to mention here, because I think it ties all of this part of the conversation together. Just yesterday, I learned about this idea in traditional software engineering, and this has been done all over industry and government. There are these things called bug bounties, right? Can you find a bug in my software capability, my software system? And companies will pay you lots of money to find a bug in their technology. It's a way of sort of open sourcing the testing of their systems. Just yesterday, I learned about a challenge that was put on by Twitter. They called a bias bounty challenge. And so Twitter has a capability, and I don't know a lot of the details. I'm not an expert on how these systems work within Twitter, but they have an algorithm, a machine learning algorithm, that identifies the key part of an image that's put into a tweet, and they auto crop the image based on that. And they put that technology out on the web and said, hey, researchers, people that are interested in this problem, anyone out there that can help us find bias in how this algorithm is working and how this machine learning algorithm is doing what it's doing. And they got a lot of great results, and many results that they didn't expect to see, many types of bias that they couldn't think of as themselves. And you can search for that out there. I don't have a link ready for you, Shane, to put into the chat, but just a really great example of bringing engineering concepts like bug bounties in traditional software systems to this machine learning world, and bringing, taking a sort of large tent approach to understanding how to explore, analyze, test these types of systems.
And also, that's a great example of planning for unintended consequences. As it would have been easy for kind of Twitter to feel confident, say, we don't have any bias, but they'd be lying to themselves. And instead they said, we're sure there's bias in here, even after all the work that we've done internally to make these systems. Why don't we put it out there and allow ourselves that vulnerability of sharing and putting that out there, because ultimately it'll make their work stronger on the other side of allowing that exploration to happen from their user community. And I think the piece that Matt talking about that made me think of is we're hearing also more and more of organizations that are being proactive to hold kind of unintended consequences workshops, to engage their kind of user community to think through potential scenarios, potential use cases. And all of that work is quite powerful and quite important, even if it means that at this stage, hey, we need to pump the brakes on this project because there's too much risk involved, or there's way too much potential for harm to be caused by the work that we're doing. I think companies are getting more comfortable with that action step, or at least I hope so. Maybe it's just the idealist in me, but I think that it's a place where overall organizations are doing more critical thinking about all of these topics, and that's super necessary, and I hope it continues with time.